Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host for this week, Matt Addison. Tom Beattie is with me. We're going to talk through Liverpool's 1-1 draw with Nottingham Forest, Diogo Jota's importance and the general state of the Premier League title race this season. With 20 games gone for Liverpool, it's shaping up quite nicely. It has been a little bit of a frustrating period, but I think it's fair to say that the Reds are still very much on the right track this season. Before we get stuck into all of that, though, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. And as ever, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box below. Tom, I'll come straight to you in terms of the Nottingham Forest game. As I mentioned at the top there, it was frustrating, I think, in some ways for Liverpool. I think they would have definitely rather have avoided going a goal down so early to that Chris Wood goal. But I suppose the flip side of that really is that they showed that fight. They improved and certainly were a lot better in that second half. So what did you make of the game overall? And you think a point in the end was maybe a decent result for Liverpool?
I think, again, obviously time will tell in terms of whether it was a good point or not. Obviously, at the time of recording, there's the North London derby to come, isn't there, later tonight? So I think, obviously, you're looking over your shoulder if you were Liverpool, thinking, Arsenal, realistically, are probably the team who are going to put up the biggest fight, I think, in terms of the title. But in terms of the game itself, yeah, I think, obviously, Liverpool conceded within 8 minutes, didn't he? And, it was a typical Forest goal from what we've seen from them so far this season. It was on the counter. And I think, Liverpool possibly played into their hands, I think, for that first half. After that, they were able to kind of sit in, weren't they? And, I felt they looked really well coached, Forest, to be fair. I think Nuno's doing a great job there. And, yeah, it was one of them games, I think, first half, Liverpool really struggled to kind of break them down. And I'd say it's probably the first time, since I've been doing this with you, that I think it was quite a disappointing performance first half. I thought it was quite frustrating. Sort of from a supporter's point of view, I felt, like I said just before, we kind of played into their hands a little bit. And we were kind of unable to break them down, weren't we? But, I think second half, it was much improved. Obviously, the substitution, Tsimikas and Jota coming on, proved a masterstroke for the manager, didn't it? They had an instant impact. I think that's the quickest substitute goal in Premier League history for Liverpool. I read last night. So that shows you the kind of impact they made straight from the bench. And it looked like a completely different team when they both came on, to be fair to them. I thought they were, it was a much improved performance from Liverpool after that. So, yeah, I think there are kind of positives to take from the game. I thought the second half performance, that's the kind of intensity that, we've come to expect from this Liverpool team. But yeah, I felt first half, maybe that intensity and general nous within the game just wasn't there. And that's maybe the little frustrating thing, I think, to kind of come out of the game. So I'm a little bit mixed in terms of the performance itself, but, it could turn out to be a good point given that their opponents last night were sitting second in the league.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the perspective really that I've put on the reverse fixture at Anfield. Obviously, I think most people came out of Anfield that day being very, very frustrated and not quite thinking that, this was a team that was going to be potentially challenging not just for Europe, but for the Champions League as well. It does put a bit of a different spin on it when you look at it in those terms. If you look at Forest probably as being maybe the third best team in the country so far this season in terms of where they are in the league and the results that they got and some of the wins that they got, not just at Anfield, but, away at other places as well. I mean, it was always going to be a tricky place to go. They reminded me a little bit of a Diego Simeone kind of, go a goal up and then try and kill the game and get through. And it was almost a bit of a throwback to that kind of game, really. And we know that that's something that Liverpool sometimes do struggle with. I think it's, fair enough that if you've got 11 bodies or certainly 10 and then Chris Wood up there on his own, it's obviously going to be difficult to move them and get them out of the way. They're very good at what they do and they're very good players as well. So it was always going to be a tricky game, I think. And I think a point really is not the worst result. If Liverpool had lost and obviously then Forest have gained those 3 points on Liverpool, I think that's different. But in terms of the general picture, it's it's not too bad for Liverpool, really. But let's focus a little bit more on Diogo Jota, because he was obviously the one who scored the goal. As you say, first touch from Tsimikas, then the first touch from him as well to head it home. I think in terms of the stats and the data, it shows that as soon as Diogo Jota came on, Liverpool suddenly were much more on top. The quality of the chances were much improved as well. Partially that could be that it's later in the game and Forest's maybe concentration or physical levels have dropped off a little bit. But at the same time, I don't think it's a coincidence really that Diogo Jota comes into that game, scores the goal. I think he says it himself in one of the interviews that he did post-match, that he felt like that gave Liverpool a little bit of momentum. And I think that is the beauty of it, isn't it? They've got so many attacking options that it wasn't quite working for Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz, but you've got Diogo Jota to come off the bench, and even Harvey Elliott and Federico Chiesa didn't even come on, but their options as well. That's a big strength for Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of been the knack of the manager so far, hasn't it? That ability to rotate so far this season. And I think that's paid dividends for Liverpool in terms of keeping people fresh, particularly up top. And yeah, it was obviously one of them nights, I think, for Diaz where, he often had his back to goal, and Liverpool were they had the lion's share of the possession throughout, really, didn't he? Particularly, the first half as well. Obviously a lot's been made of the second half performance, which was much improved, but Liverpool had a lot of the ball sort of throughout the game. And I felt, at times it didn't really work in terms of that sort of number 9 experiment again with Diaz. I think that possibly wasn't his best performance in terms of playing sort of the false 9. But yeah, being able to bring on Jota, I thought really changed the game for Liverpool. And it was a great performance, I thought, second half from him particularly. He just looked a bit of a nuisance, didn't he? And when you look at the stats, I mean, Liverpool did pepper the goal, didn't he, in terms of sort of shots on target. I think there was 7 shots in total. I think there was 6 saves from the keeper as well, who had a great performance on the night, didn't he? And, even the centre half for Forest, about, Murillo, particularly, he was one of the star players in the match, Milinkovic as well. So it was a tough team to kind of break down, I felt. But yeah, Liverpool looked much improved, I felt, when Jota came on. And he sort of gave that attacking impetus that I think Liverpool were lacking maybe, or that kind of penetration in the final third. I thought first half, it was very tough to kind of break Forest down. And you touched upon it there with the kind of Simeone points. Obviously, they took the lead early on and they were able to kind of sit in, weren't they, pretty quickly after that. And yeah, I think it brought a little bit of chaos to the game, didn't it, when Jota came on? I think they looked a little bit stunned after the equaliser, I'd say. I think, they kind of had their game plan, didn't they, where I think they were planning to kind of sit in if they were to take the lead, and they executed that really well. But it was kind of on as even, obviously, after the equaliser, and it gave Liverpool that fresh kind of impetus to go for the win, and that's what they did on the night. And I felt Liverpool overall were unlucky to not win the game when you see a kind of the overall picture of the game. And I think Jota was a massive part of that when he came on.
Yeah, I think Arne Slot has made that point, hasn't he, in the last few games. We will touch a little bit on this kind of Liverpool blip. In fact, we might as well do that now. We spoke a little bit before we came on air about Manchester United game. Didn't play particularly well. The Tottenham game, obviously, they lose late on. The circumstances around that were a little bit controversial in terms of the non-red card, and then obviously it's Lucas Bergvall that goes and scores that goal, and obviously Forest now as well. I think it would be fair on the one hand to say that Liverpool didn't play particularly well in either of those 3 games. Obviously Accrington is in there as well, but I think we can kind of discount that given it's 4th tier opposition. You don't want to read too much into a game like that. But in terms of those other 3, I think the players have been fairly open that it has been a tricky run. There has been drop points and they haven't played perfectly. But like you say there, I mean, there's an argument that they could have won any of those games on another day. They could have easily just got one more goal, or if they'd have got the first goal in that Tottenham game, it's a completely different picture that we're looking at. And I think that is an important point, really, isn't it? It's obviously true that Liverpool have dropped points in the last few games, but it's not like they're not creating chances. Even last night, there was one that was cleared off the line. There was a couple that maybe on another day, Mohamed Salah might have been able to score. I've not seen the Dominic Szoboszlai chance back yet, so I'm not sure whether that was a a really good save, or maybe not quite as perfect a finish as it should have been. But I think either way, it's one of those really where there has been a little bit of a blip, but at the same time, it's not been the worst thing for Liverpool.
Yeah, like you say, there was a lot of chances last night and a lot of good saves from Sells in the Forest goal. Obviously, the Szoboszlai chance, like you touched upon there, that was one of them where he, it was a bit of a deflection on it. He was able to kind of tip it round the post. The Gakpo one as well, kind of similar when he cut in. He scored a couple of them recently as well. So yeah, and obviously the two Salah chances as well, the kind of lobbed finish, and then the one after the corner where it was cleared out off the line. So there was a lot of big chances in that game, like you say, and they were creating chances that second half. And, I think I looked at the XG, it was over 2.35, I think, in terms of the amount of goals that were expected for Liverpool last night. So you can argue, obviously, they did more than enough in terms of sort of peppering the goal and creating them chances where, on another day, maybe one of them would have went in and you would have kind of scraped by with a narrow victory. But yeah, like you say, there's been that run now, maybe going back to the Fulham game. Obviously, Jota came on in that game and got the equaliser late on, didn't he? After sending off. And there's been good performances in there. There's the Tottenham game away, the 6-3, obviously the Leicester game 3-1, and West Ham 5-0. But yeah, I think the last kind of 3 games in terms of, the cup game against Tottenham, where we lost on the road, and then obviously the United game as well. Maybe you could argue it's looked a little bit lethargic. Maybe that fixture pile up for a couple of the players has been difficult to deal with. But yeah, I think Liverpool are doing more than enough within games to suggest that, over the course of the next kind of 18 games in the Premier League of what's left, you'd expect them to win most of them games. And I think looking at the table now, I think the best thing Liverpool have done for themselves is get that cushion over their opponents. And even coming into the game last night, obviously, you're hoping the teams around Liverpool drop points, and they did again. Obviously, Chelsea, they dropped points. I think Man City dropped points as well, didn't they? So Liverpool are getting that kind of look at the moment, which you always need when you're chasing a title. I don't think it's going to be one of them seasons where it's 90-odd points that wins the league. It's probably going to be more around kind of the 85-point mark, I'd imagine. So yeah, looking kind of at where Liverpool are sitting in the table, you've got that cushion over the teams around them now. But yet you're hoping that this kind of, if you want to call it a blip, or maybe this run of results in recent times, you're hoping that they can kind of, get the ball rolling in terms of that momentum again and get a few more wins on the board. But, there are some tricky kind of fixtures to come as well, isn't there? We've got Brentford away coming up, which, I think that's always a tough game, before the end of the month. So, that's one to look at as well, where you kind of think if you're going for a title, you need to be going away to places like Brentford and getting the win. And it's sort of being, no questions asked, sort of getting the job done. So I think the players will be looking to respond quite quickly to the kind of run of results that they've had recently. So yeah, there's no need for panic, I don't think. But yeah, equally, if you're going for a title, you need to be kind of winning them games. And I think starting with the Brentford game coming up.
Yeah, I think that the next 3 away games are going to be quite instructive in terms of not whether Liverpool will be in a title race, because I think we're pretty certain of that at this point, but sort of how comfortable and how far ahead they can get. I mean, it's Brentford away on Saturday. They've got a Champions League game, and then they've got a home game with Ipswich, another Champions League game with PSV. But the next 3, Brentford away, Bournemouth away, and Everton away, those are the next 3 away games. You can make a case in each of those for those being really difficult. Obviously, you mentioned Brentford, Bournemouth as well, having a fantastic season and have just taken points off Chelsea. They've gone to a few places and done really well this season. They've been really consistent, so that's going to be a tricky one. And obviously, Everton is always tricky, and I think probably only made even more tricky by the David Moyes story over the last couple of days as well. So yeah, I think those next 3 could be particularly interesting, I think, for Liverpool. But like you say, it is important that we touch upon some of the other teams as well in this title race, because, we've not obviously at this moment in time seen what Arsenal are going to do against Tottenham later on. But I think, for Liverpool to drop back and for Arsenal to take over, it's not just the fact that Liverpool would have to drop a few more points. It's also that Arsenal would have to go on a little bit of a run, which we haven't really seen that. They've got injuries. They've been a little bit inconsistent. They've struggled against Manchester United. They've lost at home to Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. They've not been in the best form themselves. So, as you say, Liverpool have got a buffer. But I think more than that, I just look at Arsenal at the moment, and I'm not quite convinced that I can see them going on a 10-game winning spree to really put that pressure on Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a mixed season for Arsenal, really, hasn't it? I think particularly when, they came into the season, I'd say, as kind of joint favourites, really, with Man City, in terms of expecting them to mount a real challenge for the title. And obviously, we're only really halfway through the season, aren't we? So you can only read so much into sort of the form, sort of in recent months. But yeah, just like you've touched upon there, kind of recent results would suggest that they're possibly still in that sort of tricky spot that they've been in all season, really. So, the last Premier League game was a 1-1 draw with Brighton, for example. Then the 2 cup games they've lost, obviously Newcastle and Man United as well. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a strange season for them. I think they've maybe kind of underperformed in terms of where they would have maybe expected to be. And Liverpool have benefited from that. It seems as though every time Liverpool have dropped points in the last month, the teams around them have as well. And that's why they've been able to kind of maintain quite a healthy lead at this stage of the season. So, yeah, it's quite a strange kind of, situation to weigh up, isn't it? And I think the North London derby there, we saw with Spurs, obviously, in sort of the space of a week up against Liverpool, they're, on the one hand, they can concede goals like they did, obviously, in the 6-3 game, and that was one of them games, I think, where, they did come in for that criticism, didn't they, in terms of, obviously, sort of dropping goals and chances within that game. But yeah, I think it's a bit of an odd one to weigh up. On the flip side, the cup game, obviously, they put in quite a good performance, didn't they, on the night against Liverpool, the 1-0. I think they deserve to maybe win that game. They kind of edged it, didn't they? I thought on the night there. So, yeah, I think it's one of them, obviously, where, you're hoping that Tottenham can sort of spring a bit of a surprise on Arsenal or certainly match them. Obviously, it's a tough game, isn't it, going, obviously, away to Arsenal, and particularly at a North London derby as well. But yeah, you're hoping that Arsenal can kind of take points off them.
In terms of Liverpool themselves, then, we'll go back to sort of speaking a little bit more about the game, obviously, earlier this week. In terms of that Forest match, I mean, there was a couple of other players that I wanted to pick out, really, not to be too negative in terms of Liverpool at the moment, but Jamie Carragher did tweet that they need to sign a defender. Is that a fair opinion to have, do you think? And if it is, not that Liverpool necessarily will take Jamie Carragher's advice and just go out and sign somebody, but what sort of position would that be? Would it be a versatile player? Do you have enough of a worry at left back maybe to target that kind of position? It's a really tricky one, I think, in terms of what kind of profile of player you'd be looking at.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised with the tweet from Jamie Carragher, because he didn't kind of specify what type of defender he was kind of looking for. So, yeah, you could sort of say, you could make a case like you touched upon there. There are a couple of injuries, obviously, in Liverpool's backline at the moment, Joe Gomez being the standout one. Konate's just come back from injury as well, looks a little bit rusty at times. And Jarell Quansah hasn't really played as much so far this season, has he? He's still kind of raw in terms of his development, isn't he? So, yeah, possibly you can make a case for a right centre-back, you could say. But, yeah, I think we've said it a couple of times on the show, haven't we, about the left-back position. I felt Andy Robertson on the night looked a little bit shaky at times. Obviously, they're a team, I think, that rely on the wingers in terms of the pace that they had. And, yeah, I thought it was a really good performance from Elanga again. Obviously, he impressed, didn't he, at Anfield earlier on in the season, and I thought he was really good in the reverse fixture there this week as well. So, yeah, he gave Robertson a little bit of a torrid time, I felt, and when the change did come after 60 or so minutes, I wasn't that surprised when Tsimikas came on. But, yeah, possibly some kind of doubt still exists with Tsimikas, don't they, in terms of maybe his defensive ability. And just kind of overall whether he is kind of an improvement on Andy Robertson, you'd say possibly, you'd be looking at Andy Robertson as you start and left back, wouldn't you? But yeah, I think there's still time in the window, isn't there? And possibly if there is an option out there, it wouldn't be the worst thing, I think, in terms of, maybe thinking about a reinforcement in the kind of left back position, or maybe even a versatile player who can do a bit of everything in terms of playing maybe centre back and left back. So yeah, I think that was maybe what Carragher was touching upon. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting in terms of the substitutes last night. Obviously, the manager took off Konate and Robertson, didn't he, in the second half? And he sort of went with a slightly different formation after that. So we might see a little bit more of that, I think, going forward. It was obviously a lot more attacking after that as well. So it gave Liverpool that fresh kind of impetus within the game. And they did kind of look a bit more energetic and sort of it freed Liverpool up in that final third, that change, I felt. So, yeah, you can make a case either way, can't you, in terms of signing players in them positions that we mentioned. But, yeah, I can see where he's coming from. But the position I possibly be looking at is more so the left-back position, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd agree with you actually on both of those points. I quite liked the Ryan Gravenberch experiment. I can see it possibly happening a little bit more with maybe Wataru Endo can drop in there. He's obviously played a long time. We spoke to him last weekend and he said, I think he said the ages of 18 and 25, he was a centre-back and only after that did he move forwards and play in midfield. So that's certainly, an option really for Liverpool to consider. But yeah, left-back is an interesting one, isn't it? I think, look, it's been long enough now that Andy Robertson isn't 100% at it. I think that the moment where he slipped over and seemed to panic when the ball was coming across and let in, I think it was Elanga on that side, wasn't it, for that particular chance? And yeah, it's not been the easiest season for him. I think that there is a conversation to be had, but I suspect it will probably be in the summer. I'd be surprised if Liverpool went for a left back when they've already got two left backs already who can only play left back and don't play anywhere else. I think you've probably got to lose one of those before you bring in, another option. But possibly that is something they might have to think about in terms of the summer. But just to finish off, then we spoke a little bit about the Premier League title race generally. Just in terms of sort of positivity levels, how positive are you at the moment that Liverpool will sort of get back into their groove and sort of get on with things? Because it seems to me that there's a bit of negativity creeping in, which, considering the position that they're in, 6 points clear, they've still got, or will have a game in hand after Arsenal have played Tottenham later today. It's a brilliant position to be in at this point in the season. I think everybody would have taken that. In fact, I don't think that I know that for a fact that everybody would have taken that at the start of the season. So, yeah, it's one of those where I just think it's important sometimes to think of that perspective. So, yeah, just to finish then, how do you feel at this moment in time in this title race?
I think certainly on paper, you look at sort of the standings there, and you would expect a team in Liverpool's position to go on and win it from here. Obviously that 6 point cushion on Nottingham Forest in second, and they've obviously got that game in hand as well. Arsenal have still got the North London derby to come, which it's always a tricky game that for them. It's a derby game, so it always brings up that bit of jeopardy. And yeah, I think Liverpool are in a really strong position. I think, we touched upon it before. You can debate whether Liverpool are in a blip or not. You can kind of make arguments for every one of them games that Liverpool possibly got a good point out of certain games, particularly send them off in the Fulham game, for example, the Man United game with a new manager. They maybe sprung a bit of a surprise at Anfield that night, and Liverpool did pretty well, I think, on the night to kind of come back into the game and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you can make arguments in terms of all of them games where Liverpool have dropped points so far this season. And I think things will kind of even themselves out. I think, it's always a tricky time, sort of in terms of the fixture build-up, this kind of time of year. So, yeah, you look at kind of the fixture guide after this, there are opportunities certainly for Liverpool to kind of dust themselves off and get going again. So yeah, Brentford away, you should be looking at that, I think, as a game where it's an opportunity to obviously, put maybe a few of the recent results behind them, and go out there and get a win. I think with the Champions League game coming up as well, Liverpool are in such a great position there that maybe they don't have to go as strong as what they have done in previous games in sort of the Champions League so far this season. And then obviously you got Ipswich at home and Bournemouth away, sort of at the start of February as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in there for Liverpool to kind of get the ball rolling in terms of the momentum. Again, there are tricky games in there, the Bournemouth game, for example, as well. But yeah, I think overall I'm feeling pretty positive from a supporter's point of view. We're kind of halfway through the season now, aren't we? I think overall, like you said before, if you'd told Liverpool fans we'd be in this position in January, I think we possibly wouldn't have quite believed it. So yeah, overall, I think, the manager's done an astounding job, really, hasn't he? Taking over from Jurgen Klopp as well. Yeah, it's been a massive task for him, and I think he's dealt with it really well overall. So, yeah, I'm feeling pretty positive, but I think Liverpool have kind of got to strap themselves in now and maybe look at certain games where, there's certain games in there now where I feel, there shouldn't be any doubt in terms of going out there and getting the victory. So, yeah, there's winnable games coming up, and I think that, overall I'm feeling pretty positive.
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat. I think it's a big few weeks coming up for Liverpool to kind of just make sure that this is a little blip and they can look back and think, yeah, the games have been tricky. They've got through that and maybe got back on track, maybe with a couple of goals victory at Brentford at the weekend. I think that would certainly put them straight back on the right path. And I am sure across the next few weeks, we'll be discussing plenty of those big games on the Liverpool.com podcast. But I think for this week, that will just about do us. Thank you very much to you, Tom, for joining me. I've been your host, Matt Addison, and that's it for this week. We'll catch you again next week.